Rec- Welcome, everybody. This is Dr. Mimoun Meliti, Chair of the English Department at the Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Cairo, Tunisia. Today's event is a part of a series of hybrid lectures organized annually by the Department of English Language and which tackle several issues related to language teaching, cultural studies, and literary criticism. Our guest today is Dr. Hammouda Salhi, Senior Interpreter, Professor and Author, Director of the Master Program in Translation and Interpreting, President of the VIE Agency for Interpreting Services, Member of the Editorial Board of Translation and Translanguaging in Multilingual Contexts, Head of the TURJUMAN Project for Language, Translation, Interpreting and Communication. Dr. Salhi will give us a talk today entitled Job Opportunities, Translational Skills and Meaning Negotiation. On behalf of the Department of English at Faculty of Arts and Humanities, Cairo, Tunisia, I'd like to express my sincere thanks and gratitude to Dr. Salhi for accepting to give this lecture today, and thank you very much. The floor is yours, Dr. Salhi.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mimoun Meliti. Thank you, and it is really a great honor and a pleasure to be amongst you today. Thank you, Dr. Mimoun Meliti, and I think I can call you Mimoun because we are friends now, for a wonderful and stimulating series of talks entitled February Lectures, as you said. I would like to thank you dearly for your effort in shedding light upon the subject of language, linguistics, and translation and interpreting. Thanks are also extended to you, dear colleagues, professors, interpreters, translators, and students. Thank you for attending this talk, either directly in this Zoom webinar or through the live stream. And I wish to invite you to share your thoughts and knowledge on the subject. I would like to learn from your experience, to learn from you. This talk is primarily targeting students of translation, students of languages and linguistics, but I would like to seize this opportunity to invite my dear colleagues, professors, translators, and interpreters to enrich the discussion with their experience, with their knowledge, especially with regard to the outlook of the translation and interpreting industry in Tunisia and beyond, but also to enrich the discussion with their experiences regarding makamin al-ma'na, how to negotiate meaning, and how they have acquired the translational skill and the interpreting and interpretation skill. Please note that this talk is bilingual. It is going to be held mostly in English, but with some sections explained, examples given, and also translations suggested in Arabic. Non-Arabic speakers, don't worry. Don't worry. Because most of what I'm going to say in Arabic is generally already laid down in English throughout the presentation or the course. And here I would like to start with one example in Arabic. A quote to start with, and the best to quote in the literature or from the literature would be someone like Al-Jahez. Al-Jahez said, يقول الجاحظ إن الترجمان لا يؤدي أبدا ما قاله الحكيم على خصائص معانيه، على خصائص معانيه وحقائق مذاهبه ودقائق اختصاراته وخلفيات حدوده، ولا يقدر أن يوفيها حقوقها ويؤدي الأمانة فيها ويقوم بما يلزم الوكيل. Here Al-Jahez, or Al-Jahez for our Middle Eastern friends, and we are also from the Middle East, but still the Levant, I would say, and Egypt, Al-Jahez. The translator, and quote Al-Jahez, this is an attempted translation, the translator can never render faithfully what the philosopher or the poet in this case intended to say. He is unable to reflect all layers of the author's meaning, the very nature of his approaches or beliefs, the nuances of his summaries, the secrets of his limitations. He cannot act as a faithful and loyal advocate for the author. Why I am quoting Al-Jahez, and more particularly this passage. This is a very powerful message to novice translators and students of translation, that language and translation both are tricky, and they are challenging for even the most professional and competent translators and interpreters. Because total faithfulness in rendering meaning is really complex. Total faithfulness is not human, but rather requires a divine miracle, to quote President Macron here when he conducted a visit to Putin last week. And I have an example, by the way, from that visit. There is always a margin of error, a margin of unfaithfulness to the source language text, to the source language discourse, to the source language philosophy. This margin of error goes either bigger or smaller depending on the competence of the language mediator. And here I'm going to use language mediator to refer to translators and interpreters. Here I have a personal story. Can you please switch the slide, please? Over time, I came to believe that without languages, without translation, my life would be some sort of a trip throughout a desert. My attraction for the colorful world of translation probably started at a Medina festival show during a Ramadan evening in the city of Tunis, Mahrajan Lemdina. I attended a concert performed by a Syrian artist called Jan Karat, J-A-N, the late Jan Karat. At the old school of Bir Lahjar. It's a cultural site now. Literally, Bir Lahjar literally means the stone well cover, located not far away from Zaytuna Mosque. I was thrilled with his performance, and more particularly with the ability to perform in multiple Semitic languages, such as Syriac, Assyrian, Arabic, and Aramaic. More particularly Aramaic. Why? Because I found it near miraculous to have someone performing in the language of Jesus Christ in our present time. Jan did not only perform songs, he performed translations, creative translations of the lyrics into Arabic because the audience was Arabic. I think we are Arabs. We are more Arab than Berber or Amazigh. By the way, it is problematic to say Berber or Amazigh for English speakers. We tend to use Berber, but into Arabic we say Al-Amazighiyya or Al-Amazigh. In Arabic, but in fact, translation in this show was part and parcel of the performance. One of his inspiring songs was called, if I remember correctly, من الشباك أرأيتها من الشباك أرأيتها ظالم. ظالم means, have you seen her through the window? This song translated very perfectly the colorful and well-decorated doors and windows of the Medina. And Medina, for the non-Arabic speakers, is the old town of the city of Tunis and many cities across the Arab world, where the performance took place in the Medina. That night has lifted my spirit and changed my whole life. I have started to perceive things differently. He translated, but he did not translate also. He expressed very original and genuine emotions. So his translated and untranslated songs and emotions have purged away my soul from the dust of everyday life. And my interest and my passion in languages, or for languages, my interest in and passion for languages has flowered into a new hobby, and at the same time a new profession, namely translation. I decided to become a translator, an interpreter that night. Translation has shaped my experience, has sharpened my thinking. I started as a novice translator, as a volunteer translator. I started as an informal and amateur interpreter, interpreting for my family members, interpreting for my friends, interpreting into Tunisian Arabic movies produced or subtitled or dubbed in French or English. This talk, therefore, is built around the idea that language mediation or language services, here in this case, and when I say mediation, please replace it with translation and interpreting, and mediators with translators and interpreters. Language mediation, despite its complexity, is going more digital, is going more global, and is offering more space to novice practitioners than before. And that shift is bigger than most of us might think. Therefore, novice practitioners need to be empowered. Need to be empowered because they will be called to serve meetings, to translate texts in the informal space, which is not the informal sector or the dark market. No, they are needed. They are needed because professional interpreters have or would be declining offers with certain conditions, especially in times of crisis. And the novice translators and interpreters are not taking the share of competent interpreters. They have their place. So therefore, novice practitioners need to be empowered with relevant translational skills and with the capacity to negotiate meaning, للتعرف والوصول إلى مكان من المعنى, more properly and more competently. Can you switch the slide, please? This is the structure of my talk. First, I'm going to discuss very briefly the relationship between language and translation. And then I'm going to discuss the edges of professional translation, which is offering, or those edges are offering more space to novice translators and interpreters. And then I will try to investigate the job outlook and how the industry is going more digital and more global. 4, I will be discussing translational skills and meaning negotiation with many examples, 4 basic examples or case studies. And then I will end with recommendations. So language and translation. The translational competence starts with the knowledge of more than one language. This is obvious. The acts of learning and translating may be seen at some point 2 sides of the same coin, because the easiest way to perform translation would be through a better learning scheme. That's why the 2 are interrelated, very closely interrelated. And also the most fun way to learn new languages and upgrade translational and interpreting skills is to travel to different places, to explore their local language, food, and culture. And I have given a talk on travel and interpreting, a journey into the multiple worlds or words of interpreters. You can find it on YouTube. However, in the new digital age, there are a lot of tools and websites available to know different languages and translate and have a similar experience lived virtually. However, a significant part of what is translated and what is interpreted has been carried out by amateur, informal, and novice translators and interpreters, or mediators. And I have given many examples in another talk, another YouTube talk, entitled Translating on a Shifting Ground. On the edges of professional translation, volunteer or volunteering in times of crisis. I think Tunisians remember quite well the sudden influx of refugees coming from neighboring Libya in 2011, and the establishment of the Shusha refugee camp, and how humanitarian organizations rushed to hire novice translators and amateur interpreters. They are called linguists, and they have been recruited in the hundreds at that time. By the way, since 2011 and over almost 2 years or even less, the number of practicing interpreters in Tunisia has almost doubled, perhaps thanks to the crisis of refugees. Now, the entire world is facing another growing and large-scale humanitarian crisis caused by primarily COVID-19, but also the refugee plight, natural disasters, conflicts across the world. So all of the above crises caused another crisis, a crisis of communication. Translation and interpreting in times of crisis has been facilitated primarily by volunteer groups. And I have seen in the refugee camps in North Greece how people, the young people who had who know little English rushed to help translating for the staff of humanitarian organizations. So this is part of the informal practice of translation and interpreting. For instance, due to the lack of professional translators, the authoritative translation of COVID-19 messages into minority languages, for example, in the United States of America and elsewhere in the world, could not be completed as regularly and swiftly as into major languages. So there is a niche here for jobs. The main lesson drawn from the pandemic is that translation and interpreting services are crucial in times of crisis. Natural disasters are also no exception. However, machine translation is not trustworthy. Rather, it can lead to serious consequences. For example, I found in the literature that in 2017, the use of a machine translation tool to translate a wildfire notes in California, United States of America, caused a chaos and mistranslated the word brush fire using the Spanish word fipilo para el pelo, means literally hairbrush in place of brush. And I tried to check its translation and into Arabic, and I found it فرشاة النار. So be careful of فرشاة النار, حذاري. That's the importance of human translation, or at least human checked translation, is very obvious when lives are at risk. Google Translate simply falls short of providing a reliable message. There is a refugee crisis in many places in the world. And this means more demand for the so-called sensitive languages. To quote George Walker Bush here I mean Arabic, Pashto, Dari, Farsi languages. And interpreters of these languages will be in higher demand. So organizations providing aid to Afghan refugees across the world have struggled to keep up with the demand for language services with the influx of refugees and asylum seekers fleeing Afghanistan after the withdrawal of the US forces. And this happened, a similar example took place in Syria during the civil war, or the events taking place there, to be more neutral. So interpreters in refugee settings should be able to understand how to convey some of the mental health issues, to be able to grasp the meaning nuance and address the cultural differences. Sometimes they are called cultural mediators, and they are hired as such, cultural mediators. So students of languages and or of translation seeking to get interpreter or translator jobs should begin by getting experience wherever they are, and they can seize those opportunities. The translation industry has grown quickly in the last decade into a seizable industry which provides different kinds of services and products to facilitate intercultural communication and multilingual exchanges. The overall industry outlook looks very promising, despite all the crises, and even perhaps especially during the times of crisis, and could improve even more in steadily rising language service market. This positive outlook is motivated and facilitated by a trend in which the industry is going more digital and more global. So the trend is expected to continue throughout the 2022-2030 period, projection period, contributing to relatively rapid growth in the number of jobs for interpreters and translators across all industries in the economy. So in the strongly interconnected markets, the Tunisian market, the local, even the Libyan, the neighboring Libyan market, the Arab market, and the international market, all of these, the demand for translators and interpreters will remain strong, especially for the language pair of English-Arabic, Arabic-English. But COVID-19 has shaped the language service industry. COVID-19 has changed the world irrevocably, forcing the translation and interpreting industry to rapidly adopt digital technology and tools to reduce the disruption of day-to-day operations. Since early March 2020, multinational corporations and international organizations have turned face-to-face or on-site meetings into conferences, video conferences, and interpreters are being hired to service RSI meetings, RSI, remote simultaneous interpreting. So in-demand languages for translation, as you can see on the graph, these are the languages most used worldwide. Estimated number of first language speakers worldwide in 2018. Chinese, with all the variations of Chinese, Mandarin, and so on. Spanish, English, Arabic. So Arabic is fourth, ranked fourth. Hindi, Bengali, Portuguese, Russian, Japanese, and so on and so forth. We all know that English is the most used language on the internet, but according to the survey from Statista, in 28, Chinese has the largest number of first language speakers. Research shows that besides Arabic, the following are the most in-demand languages for translation. First, English, means English-Arabic pair for the all the meetings involving the Arabic language. English first, French second, Spanish third, German fourth, Russian fifth, Japanese, Portuguese, Italian, Chinese, and so on. But, while interpreting services registered a decrease in demand, especially those services associated with travel and leisure, certain services, such as medical interpreting, seem to have seen a surge in demand. What does the future look like? There are two prerequisites for any mediator to do well in the new normal: resilience and adaptability. COVID-19 has created a sort of a digital divide between mediators who have, some of the mediators who have access and knowledge on how to use technology and online platforms such as Zoom, this one, and those who do not have the access and the knowledge. Certainly, this doesn't mean that offline mediators are getting nowhere. In fact, I know that many of those interpreters have already started upgrading their skills and familiarizing themselves with online platforms, RSI platforms more particularly, so that they can too offer their services wherever, whenever they are. So with the RSI, and when I say RSI, I mean, again, remote simultaneous interpreting. With RSI and hybrid mode of holding meetings, I anticipate a significant increase in demand for interpreters in the long run, because they are more accessible, affordable, and easier to hold, despite all the side effects, certainly. So the pandemic has highlighted the benefits and perhaps the drawbacks too of virtual and hybrid events, how they generate new job opportunities for mediators, and how they engage with a broader audience. As a bridge of communication, the power of translation during the pandemic was beyond imagination, and this is visible. But again, there is a trend for the industry to go more global. Means you need to equip yourself as a novice translator with so many techniques to survive on the global market, the international market. So it is not enough for you to be firing all cylinders and doing well at home. This does not entitle you to automatically make a name for yourself and sell your services at the international market and being an international interpreter. By the way, there is a slight difference between senior interpreter and international interpreter. Senior international interpreter sometimes is being used as a term. So it takes time and effort to have sufficient mastery of cross-cultural communication. I would like to recommend you invest in upgrading the skills in cross-cultural communication and mastery of language variations, the accents, the dialects, accents of Sudanese Arabic, Iraqi Arabic, Libyan Arabic, and so on and so forth. Translational skills and meaning negotiation. Here I have coined two terms. They are interrelated. Meaning making, implicature, and I use them from pragmatics, and meaning milking, the inferences. The interpreter and the translator are both in perpetual quest for meaning, and you cannot have access to meaning and render meaning into another language without these two techniques and tactics: meaning making and meaning milking. Language uses And here I would like to make a statement here that the profession, the language industry is tricky. I have one example here. I've reviewed so many translations and heard so many interpreters. Most of them are novice, and I found out that the approximation of meaning is overwhelming, and that these translators and interpreters fear to introduce some judicious interventions, to make some judicious interventions that are needed because of difference between languages and cultures. Here is one example from Emmanuel Macron, French president. Il a dit, j'ai très envie d'emmerder les non-vaccinés. And I reviewed how this has been translated in international press. I will give just one example from the BBC. The BBC used the expression or the utterance, I want to piss off the non-vaccinated. Apologies for this really harsh and offensive expression, but this has been used by French president. So language uses enhanced translation are tricky. It is not easy to render utterances from one language to another in any context. Political context is an example here. Last month, we received this striking reminder of how tricky translation can be. Did you follow the news when President Emmanuel Macron was interviewed by, I think, Le Figaro, or Le Parisien, sorry. And he made the statement, and the statement went viral on the internet and became very controversial, especially amongst French citizens. Around the globe, journalistic translators did their best to devise the most appropriate equivalent and the most faithful interpretation. But still, if you can see the attempt by the BBC, still it falls short of reproducing a more faithful meaning. The second example I'm going to give is a text entitled What Refugees Face on the World's Deadliest Migration Route, an investigative story by the New York Times. I translated this text into Arabic with the students in the classroom. And here I would like to place an emphasis on 3 or 4 items, not words. The first is frantic figures. Stinging, salty waves crashed over the deck as frantic figures climbed on board. تسلقت تلك الوجوه الشاخصة قاربنا والأمواج القارسة بملحها الأجاج ترتطم بسطحه. وجوه شاخصة, perhaps they don't collocate quite well as عيون شاخصة do collocate, لأن العيون الشاخصة في اللغة العربية هي العيون الثابتة الراسخة من شدة الهول أحيانا. واقترب الوعد فإذا هي شاخصة أبصار الذين كفروا. شاخصة للهول هذا، وهذا هو الهول، أهوال، وبالتالي استخدمنا كلمة أهوال في العنوان ترجمة ل by way of explicitation. The meaning is implicit in the English original. What refugees face هي الأهوال. We made it explicit, and this is one of the techniques in translation. So this is how to negotiate meaning والوصول إلى مكامن المعنى. تسلقت تلك الوجوه الشاخصة قاربنا والأمواج القارسة بملحها الأجاج. We don't say الأمواج المالحة. This is goes without saying الأمواج المالحة, ولكن بملحها وأضفنا الأجاج salty. في يعني زدنا درجة, وهذا مسموح لأننا نصوغ ونحيك باللغة العربية. The second observation has to do with the use of أصاب وأصابتهم. وسرعان ما عج قاربنا الصغير بعشرات اللاجئين, لأن الإصابة هنا في اللغة العربية تستخدم في سياقين أساسيين, بمعنى الفاجعة وبمعنى المصائب, وأيضا بمعنى الصواب, بمعنى الصواب. إذا استخدمناها في السياقين وفي المعنيين هنا. أصابهم الهلع negative, وأصابتهم يد النجاة positive. ومنها أصاب السهم الهدف, أي أدركه ولم يخطئه, والمصيبة عافانا وعافاكم الله, وأصابت الكرة المرمى. Now, the other example I would like to discuss has to do with knapsack. Knapsack in English is a bag carried on the back or over the shoulder in English. But here we cannot translate it without knowing what is it. فلا نقول حقيبة مباشرة أو وانتهى الأمر. لابد أن نحلل ونغوص لنصل إلى مكامن المعنى, لأنه هذا مهاجر بين ظفرين غير شرعي انقطعت به السبل, فكيف يحمل حقيبة؟ هل هو كأنه قاصد بلدا آخر لغاية السياحة ممتطيا طائرة؟ هذا ليس واقع الحال. knapsack, here we cannot translate without having an idea about the concept of bag. There are backpack, there are belt bags, there are bindle bags, there are camera bags, bucket bag, and sometimes evening bags for ladies. So we need to have the whole system of bags, and we pick up one. In Arabic, الجراب مستخدم أكثر. الجراب وهو ما يحمله الراعي, وهو وعاء من الجلد. ولا أريد أن أعلق هنا على ضاو, وأريد أن أعلق ولو أنني أريد أن أعلق عليها لضيق الوقت. So I'm going to move on to example number 3. Judicious intervention is always needed. Here, another example from Emmanuel Macron. Before he had his meeting with Putin, he made the following statement in French. Je suis raisonnablement optimiste. Je ne crois pas au miracle spontané. The Economist used the following translation. I don't believe in spontaneous miracles. And here, I think that in English we can have other translations and options, such as wonders or something like that, not necessarily miracle or spontaneous miracle. And I'm not sure whether they do collocate quite well in English, spontaneous miracle. And I would like to be helped by my colleagues, English native speakers present here. So in روسيا اليوم ترجمت معبرا عن تفاؤله المعتدل دون توقع أي معجزات. أسقطت spontaneous. So spontaneous was not translated here. And القدس العربي translated spontaneous as الفورية, which is really a wrong translation in this context. It is not it's not فورية, immediate, literally, for non-Arabic speakers. المعجزة هي أمر خارق للعادة يظهره الله على يد نبي لا على يد بشر. وفي الثقافة العربية الإسلامية وحتى العربية المسيحية وغير ذلك، هناك المعجزة التي يأتي بها نبي، ولكن ما يأتي به البشر يسمى كرامة. وأعتقد أن إيمانويل ماكرون هو من البشر وليس من الأنبياء، ويمكن أن نقترح الكرامة حتى وإن كان استعمال المعجزة استعمالا من الصور الإبداعية، ولكن يمكن أن نستخدم الكرامة. So I would like to move on to example 4. And here I would like to ask you 4 questions. Can the word food be technical? Yes or no? Can you please answer on the chat? And the second question, do you think that translating the concept of food can be arduous, challenging? 3, does food include drinks in your mother tongue? And 4, how to translate food waste in your mother tongue? So, food in English includes drink and any substance that has been used in the manufacture, preparation, or treatment of food. Food waste is associated with inedible parts removed from the human food supply chain. So here we can, and the answer to the question is that food can be too technical. So it is a recommendation and a message to novice translators and interpreters: don't trust the expressions, terms, and take them almost always as general vocabulary items. And because they move on very quickly to embody technical concepts. And there is a fully fledged discipline related to food and food waste. But here, this is a technique, another skill on how to understand food in 2 cultures, for example, English and Arabic. English and Arabic. Now, the English culture is really systematic and more organized around concepts. الثقافة العربية في المقابل، كان العرب يعيشون في الصحراء وكانوا من البدو، كانوا يعيشون في معظم الأحيان على التقشف، فلم يكن الطعام متوفرا وفي وفرة إلا الآن العرب أصبحوا ينعتون بذلك، وخاصة في بعض بقاع المنطقة العربية. فهذه الثقافة غير الثقافة الإنجليزية، وبالتالي الآن كيف نترجم إلى اللغة العربية فود؟ هل هي طعام؟ هل هي الأكل؟ هل هي الغذاء؟ وفود ويست كيف نترجمه؟ هل هي نفايات الطعام؟ نفايات الغذاء؟ هل هي نفايات ونفايات تحيل أكثر على نفايات من المصانع وغير ذلك؟ هل هي التبذير من بذرة كما بذر الفلاح الحبة زرعه وألقاه؟ على الأرض. هل هي الإسراف أي تبديد الطعام؟ ولكن الإسراف في الأكل ليس تبذير أي الفضلات الطعام التي تلقى في القمامة، وإنما الإفراط في الأكل. كيف نترجم food waste إذن؟ هل هي بقايا الطعام؟ هل هي الأغذية المهدورة؟ هل هي مخلفات الطعام مثل مخلفات المحركات؟ هل هي نفايات الطعام والأغذية؟ هل هي فضلات الطعام؟ It's a very good question to ask. I don't claim to have a good answer, but this is food for thought and food again. وإن كان الماء في اللغة العربية من الطعام أم لا؟ أعتقد كان هناك فصل في اللغة العربية، الطعام غير الشراب. يمكن أن يقول الإنسان أكلت هنيئا وشربت مريئا، أي الشرب غير الأكل، فالطعام يؤكل لا يشرب. وحتى عندنا شيء بين البين، to eat soup in English هي يحتسي، وجاء من الحساء. إذن ومنها جاءت الطعام، جاءت التطعيم vaccination، لأنه يعطي طعام أساسا. ومنها جاء الطعم. رأيتم جمال اللغة العربية، ولأنها لغة غير سلسلية، لا تقوم بالسلسلة suffix prefix إلى آخره، وإنما بالوزن والمعنى النووي، يعني يرحل مع استخدامات الكلمة والاشتقاقات المختلفة. إذن these are the main examples as case studies. وبالإضافة إلى ذلك الطعام أيضا وخدمات الطعام، هناك فروقات وتباينات شاسعة جدا between food served in transport services such as train stations, airports, and so on, and food served in accommodation buildings such as short-term. So these are really, this is a fully fledged discipline, such as hotels or long-term accommodation such as dorms, school dorms, and so on. Now, I will stop at this level. And now there is another term that is called smart bins, how to quantify and count the volume of food waste and how to do scaling، تعمم الرقم المتحصل عليه، وهذا كأنه دخل في علم الإحصاء الآن. I would like to finish this presentation with some recommendations. The road to karama، الطريق إلى الكرامة. Can you please display the last slide? لأن المعجزة هي من الأنبياء والكرامة بشرية. I would like to recommend novice translators and interpreters to take up translation as a new hobby, to be flexible and open. Don't let your stones cover the well of knowledge. Bir Lahjar, remember? It's a school. Make human judicious interventions and avoid the automatic hairbrush-like interventions and translations. Go more digital and start global. Start global by acquiring the necessary skills, such as knowing the accents. Don't rely on your certificates and degrees to get a job. Rely on the skill and on your knowledge. Take advantage of any crisis A crisis for mediators, whether fortunately or unfortunately, is often a blessing in disguise. مصائب قوم عند قوم فوائد. And here I would like to quote Al-Jahez again. إن الترجمان لا يؤدي أبدا ما قاله الحكيم. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for your kind attention, and apologies for my lengthy talk. Thank you, and over to you, Mimoun.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salhi, for this insightful presentation. In fact, we benefit from it a great deal, especially the students who are present in the lecture room here in Faculty of Arts and Humanities Cairo 1, as well as the discussions that I have been seeing going on in the comment section. So thank you very much indeed. After your permission, we'd like to start with the number of questions raised here in the lecture room in Faculty of Arts and Humanities Cairo 1. And I leave the floor to the moderator, Ashraf Waslati, to provide you with the number of questions. Would you like to have 2 questions each time, or one by one? Yes, Dr. Salhi. So it's 2 questions each time, or one by one?
I think we can take rounds of 4 or 5 questions at a time. Right. No worries. I will be taking note of the questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right, deal. The floor is yours, Ashraf.
Hello, Dr. Salhi. Thank you for your efforts. So I'll start with the first question. After having an MA degree in translation, how can we, translators, may specialize in a field of translation, such as medical, legal, or financial, in order to find more job opportunities? As you said, there is a lack of professional translators, or let's say specialized translators. So this is the first question. The second, which comes first, interpreting or translating? How to have, what to do to have a good career in the future? Is there any trainership to be a professional translation, like interpretation studies, for example? Third question, how to upgrade the skills to translate, as you said, such as intercultural studies, translation, because translation is translating from a culture to another, and especially the general culture, because it's crucial in improving translation skills. Next question, what's the best place to acquire experience when qualified with a bachelor degree in translation, for example? Is it through a master degree or through the career in translation? What can a PhD add to the translator? We can start by those. Or
yes, yeah, we can start with these. These are 4 questions, right? Or 5?
Yeah, 4. The last
4 questions, exactly. Thank you very much for these very good questions. Well, about specialization, I think I would like to recommend each one to follow his or her own intuition and passion and hobby. Try to specialize in an area that is subject to your hobby, because like medical, for example, or legal, or fisheries, or start with something that you like, you are passionate about. Start to cross the boundary, to cross the border from one language to another with something that is very familiar to you. So this is my advice. The second question, to start off, certainly I do recommend you start with the translation practice, and then you move on to interpreting practice, because interpreting is much more demanding, much more challenging, and leaving no room for the interpreter to to check resources, dictionaries, but in translating, and I have devised a sort of a method, and I have shared it with my students, and I called it the 10 commandments on how to upgrade your translational skill step by step. So 10 steps. The third question, upgrading skills in cross-cultural communication. Cross-cultural communication is even movies. Try to use your, if you have a hobby of watching movies, Hollywood movies and elsewhere, but don't stick only to Hollywood movies, movies and cultures and documentaries, or so drama, documentaries, and debate shows. Try to follow that. Try to upgrade the skills and try to get familiar with the various cultural differences. Even in the Arab world, there are huge differences in the Arab world in terms, and this is also made more difficult by the accents and the dialects. The best place to acquire translation, MA or experience, certainly experience. I know most of the translators and interpreters, they don't have a degree in translation, I would say. لأني دائما أصف أن الترجمة مثل المعبد الذي يؤمه الناس من كل حدب وصوب. هي pejorative، فيها إنقاصية، ولكن من كل فج عميق استخدم أفضل. يأتوها، فهو معبد ليس حكر على المتخرجين من الترجمة. في جامعة تونس المنار والمعهد العالي للعلوم الإنسانية عندنا ماجستير في الترجمة التحريرية والترجمة الفورية. وهنا يمكن أيضا بالإضافة إلى بعض البرامج الأخرى في منوبة وفي عندكم في القيروان، ويمكن أن نبدأ بالدراسة والتعليم، ولكن لا ينبغي أن نكتفي بذلك. We should not stick to education and just a quest for a diploma. Diploma cannot make you into a successful translator or interpreter. And I think in most educational institutions, including my own institution, people are deprived of true skill-based and market-oriented education. This is a fact. What happens in most cases that training centers and universities, still including my own, students are given pieces of paper called degrees, diplomas, to convince them that they have the skill, that they have become professional translators. And here it is not to denigrate the students or the institutions. I don't mean that, but I think there is a niche for novice translators and interpreters that they can use. And here the second space, I would say, because most of the interpreters and translators will certainly be declining offers coming from that space, declining those job offers. Try to seize the opportunity. When students sometimes do not have sufficient knowledge and skills, and even some translators and interpreters, they don't have the sufficient knowledge and skills, but they are in a training, in an internship. And I think that having very good experience starts at the 10th or 15th year of career, of experience. Most of the students, let me give you one tip. If you would like really to become a very good translator or interpreter, you should start with translation first, and then interpreting, as I said earlier, and have a strategy, a 2 or 3 year plan, action plan, in which you have to force yourself to translate an average of 1,000 words per week into English or into Arabic or French or the language pair you are working with. And also, if you would like to become an interpreter, at least 1 hour video in drama, debate, documentary should be interpreted per week. Thank you very much. Over to you, Mimon.
We have more questions if you are able to answer it. To answer them. Mr. Salih.
Yes, sorry, I didn't get you quite well. Can you repeat the question, please?
What are the best websites that a translator can benefit from, including websites that offer online jobs? How can translators find job opportunities online?
Yes, there are so many websites, but I would like to recommend for novice and fresh graduate students to start with the volunteering work. And there is a whole website for UN volunteers, and you can check the job announcements for volunteers on a regular basis. And they can also subscribe to some other websites such as pros.com, Translators Cafe, and also check some other restricted websites where they have to pay some fee. But again, I don't recommend you start with that. Try to start with the skill, the knowledge first. Thank you.
Next question. If we consider the examples of French President Emmanuel Macron, and in relation to translating news, how far can a journalist translator set their agenda, a political agenda for the public over a given issue?
Thank you very much. This is a very good question. Well, most press translators or translators for the media are novice and unprofessional translators. They are journalists, they are bilingual, and they are being given the task to translate. So I think it would be better to assign that task to a novice translator rather than a journalist, a bilingual journalist. So this is to start with. The second thing, yes, I do really believe that there is always an agenda in the media or in the world of politics. There is always an agenda, but here the thing that is at stake has to do with meaning and translation. When we are in the process of translating, so we have to be aware of the ideologies, the agenda, and so on, and try to take that into account. And this is a whole subject, a fully fledged discipline, translating ideology. But now, if we take translation as a final product and commenting on the final product, again, I don't really think that translations are always innocent. There is always an agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, Doctor. The next question. Can media use translation as a tool to set their agenda, meaning translation and media agenda setting?
Can you please repeat the question again? I didn't get it quite well.
Okay, already answered, I'm sorry. Next question. What are the requirements to enroll in MA in translation at your institution?
Well, as I said, our master's program involves translation and interpreting, both. And to enroll, you need to sit for an admission exam in early September. And this year, the announcement will be published by June or July. And then they have to sit for the admission exam, and they will be tested by translating 2 texts, one from English into Arabic and another one from Arabic into English, two small passages. And then if they are successful, they will be interviewed, and we will check their oral skills and, between inverted commas, public speaking skills, because interpreters, they need to invest in the skills of active listening and public speaking, and the knowledge of the 2 languages in this language pair, English and Arabic, I mean. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Salhi. I have to stick to the plan and the promise that I gave you concerning the time limit. We have a lot of questions, in fact, but I would like to invite you to another maybe lecture, if you may. And this is actually a request from the students here. They requested another lecture, maybe, if you may, if it is possible, another time when it's possible for you. But thank you very much.
It's a pleasure and an honor.
Thank you for this outstanding lecture. We are indebted to you for accepting to deliver this thought-provoking talk and for patiently and comprehensively answering the questions of the audience. We are thinking of establishing a project here, MA in translation and interpreting, and I will definitely visit you and have a chat with you concerning this issue in case it is possible for you to help in this regard.
You are most welcome, dear Mimoun.
Thank you very much. Thanks indeed. And I wish you good luck in all your career. And many thanks to the audience also for attending.
Thank you very much, Mimoun. Thank you. I would like also to thank the students for their good questions. I would like to thank the audience who are coming and following us from around the globe, I think. I can see people attending this this discussion and conversation from Indonesia. I can see, can you please write your countries, from Algeria, from Tunisia, from Syria, Ankara, and so on. Can you please help me, and we will finish this. I'm sorry, I need to
from Jeddah, Doctor.
Jeddah, أهلا يا مرحبا.
I've been listening to you and patiently listening to
دكتور معلش. أهلا وسهلا يا مرحبا. So can I request the audience to just write in 1 minute a question or a comment on the talk, and especially areas for improvement. That would be really very helpful, and I'm grateful to you. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.